Recording. Good evening, everybody. My name is David Poole. I'm here from the Driving Instructors Business Summit. We're here supporting Speed of Sight, Pass a Pound, and tonight's webinar actually includes Kevin Graham at the top. I'm trying to get rid of. Sorry, Kevin. Tonight's webinar is brought to you by AD Indy because thanks to Cal and Tina at AD Indy, they pay for this software to support the Driving Instructors Business Summit, which supports Speed of Sight because it's a Speed of Sight Driving Instructors Business Summit. And tonight we have a very, very special world record-breaking webinar. Tonight we have Smart Driving with us. We have John Farlam and Graham Lucas. I'm going to get to say hello in a second. I think they're waving. But yeah, I've done webinars before. I've seen other webinars. I've never seen a webinar as big as this. There are 525 people actually registered for this webinar. So it's probably a world record for driving instructors.
Record for me, David.
So let's have a big welcome. Everybody can have a nice little round of applause at home to John Farlam and Graham Lucas of Smart Driving. Good evening, gents.
Good evening, everybody.
To everybody in the West Midlands, that is deafening.
Well,
David, not everybody will, presumably, or I shouldn't make assumptions really that everybody will know me, but not everybody will perhaps know Graham. And Graham can just introduce himself a little bit.
yeah, Graham, please do so, mate.
John's always doing this to me. I know the surprise question, the surprise. But I'm really responsible for some of the training and the business and development of smart driving into quite a large company now. And I'm an ADI. I've taken my standards check in 2014 and got a grade A with 49 out of the 51. I know where I went wrong. But we've been developing some standards check videos and things like that. So we're well into the standards check sheets and what it's all about.
Excellent. Thanks, Graham. And you just quickly mentioned about your standards check software. I mean, tonight is all about the standards check. Excuse me if I do occasionally from time to time call it the check test. Actually, it's one of my first questions. I'll come on to it in a minute. We've received quite a lot of questions already, so I've kind of condensed them. So I'm not going to attach any names to these questions because I've gone, that person's asked those 10 questions and those 10 questions have come from those 30 people there and what have you not. So I've got quite a few. So John, please explain, you know, I'll do a bit of Cilla Black, you know, what's your name and where'd you come from? And then we'll crack on.
Well, for those who don't know my name, it's John. And where do I come from? Goodness gracious, 37 years later, I'm still in this industry, beavering away via, I don't know, via jobs like training director at LDC and running my own business and just about doing everything over the years, I think. And writing lots of stuff, boring people to death, talking rather a lot. I like talking, David.
Me too.
And so if you're going to ask me how many questions you reckon tonight, more than one?
Well, I've got one other question before we really kick off. And
I mean, an hour and a half for each answer.
In your business, it's a bit of a threesome. So where is Adam Bragg right now? I mean, I know
he's hiding. He's got this fetish about watching me on the screen, and he's hiding in the other room watching this as we go along and sort of monitoring Facebook, I think, as we
tend to complement each other quite well in smart driving. We've got John with all the technical knowledge, if you like, business background, having sold a laser cutting business.
And Adam does as he's told.
And Adam's the sales and marketing man for our company.
Well, look, okay, let's crack on. I keep on saying let's crack on, but before we do, a lot of people have never been on a webinar before, and I've seen a really good question by a lady over in Derby. I know she's from Derby because I remember her name. Dominica says, where can we find the video regarding the standards check? Dominica, this is the video. We're just about to create it now. This is the beginning of it. Looks like our friend Kevin Graham's come back.
Hello, Kevin. Yeah.
Can't get rid of Kevin, can we? Bless his cotton socks. Kevin's up in Carlisle, by the way. He's looking for AD Ice to join his team. So there you go, Kevin. There's a cheap one. So if any of you got any questions, if you're watching this on Facebook, Adam's on Facebook right now. So if you've got any questions on Facebook, do fire them in there. Adam will try and bring them upstairs into the office.
I think it's in the bath now, actually.
But the ones, he's in the bath of Judith.
On the stairs like that little Robert the Frog, you know.
The ones that he can answer, though, he will answer them live in the Facebook chat. Yeah. And, you know, if you watch this tomorrow or anything like that and you want to put a question there, Adam's going to be monitoring that for the rest of his life. Yeah. So, gentlemen, I'm going to kick off. I'm going to get this list of questions on here on my screen.
Can I just say one thing, David? We sell. Where's he gone? Where's Dave? Kevin's back by himself. We sell a series of videos, standards check with a money back guarantee, and for this webinar, if you contact us within the next couple of days, adam.bragg@smartdriving.co.uk, you can have the videos for 20 quid.
Hold on a second.
Adam.bragg.
That's 2 G's, isn't it?
Yeah. At
smartdriving.co.uk.
Yeah.
What do you normally say, Sat?
Sorry?
You normally say it's at
49.95, I think it is.
You normally say it's at 49.95, but it's 20 quid. It's 20 quid. And let's say people have got to email Adam by close.
Adam, say please, can we have the discount? And Adam will say yes.
And we'll get a code. Can we do that, Adam?
Yeah, we can.
We'll get a code.
Look, I need to tell everybody this is not a selling webinar. It is because I like these guys. I want to push their stuff, but this is all about the standards check. So I've got a few questions just to get the event rolling.
Fire away.
John and Graham are then going to elaborate, and please, people got questions, fire it in, because I mean, we could be here all day. So my first question, I thought I really need a good foundation question rather than a detailed question. So a good foundation, I thought, was what's the difference between the old check test and the standards check?
Now that's a great one, David. And like yourself, I'm still guilty, despite being me and working on standards check stuff all the time. I'm still guilty of saying check test occasionally. So shoot me if you know. But what's the main difference? Hey, there are a lot of differences. People who've already done the standards check will know that it's marked differently for a start, but it's the way that it's marked that's mainly different. The old check test focused on individual skills and on a lot of subject. They used to pay a lot of attention to subject matter. The standards check is very different in that it's looking more at the communication process. It's looking at what's happening between the learner, between the driver and the instructor. And it's looking at particularly how much the instructor is tapping into the needs and in some instances the wants as well, but particularly the needs of the learner and how much they're working as a team. So in the old days, it used to be instructor says, hello, this is what we're going to do today. This is your goals for the lesson. This is what you're going to learn from it. And the learner would say something like, well, and the instructor would say, well, no, be quiet. I haven't finished telling you what you're going to learn today. And at the end of the check test, that would be a great structured lesson. The instructor had put together a good lesson. He decided what was going to happen. He'd gone and done it. Not really good enough anymore. The learner has to have a lot more involvement. Now, that doesn't mean that the instructor still can't have ideas about what's going to happen. I mean, the instructor's expert. I've seen some people going way the other way now, you know, saying to the learner, what are we going to do today? And that's not good standards check stuff either. That's not what the standards check.
Why not?
Because the learner pays the instructor for his expertise or her expertise and skill.
Yeah.
And so The instructor, though, the difference is before that expertise and skill was a one-way process. Yeah.
So what you're saying is then go in with the lesson plan, but adjust it to the needs of the client. Is that right?
Well, yes, I would say go in. Well, this is specifically standards share, but it's also good training practice. So the lesson plan starts at the end of the previous lesson. Hey, what are we going to be doing next week? What are we going to be doing tomorrow? Whenever the next lesson is,
right.
The next lesson. Now, lesson plan's a great term. I kind of prefer the term now. I'm starting to shift more to the term of team plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's a team, and there are two people in the team. One sits in the instructor's seat, the other one sits behind the steering wheel. And they sometimes swap places as the lesson goes along. But there are two people in that team, and they both are contributing equally, as opposed to the old days where the instructor would be doing 90% and the learner would be doing 10% of the input. Sit and listen sort of stuff, you know? So I think that's really the main difference between the check test and the standards check, is the standards check examiners are looking for much more of a team effort. They're looking for the instructor responding to the learner a lot more and tapping into those. And I use the word needs more than wants. Wants are very important because wants are all about motivation. You know, what do you want to do today? How do you want to do it? Where do you want to do it? But the learner's wants aren't always best for the learner's needs. And by working as a team together and discussing those wants, you can then come down to the needs, and then you can start to get a good session.
And you are the expert. They are paying the expert for that guidance.
For the guidance, yeah.
Yeah, it's more about the instructor seeing the learning through the client's eyes, if you like, that client-centered learning process, and helping the client analyze risks, hazards, and things like that as well, rather than saying, you know, there's a car parked on the left-hand side, what are you going to do about it? It's more about helping the student understand what they should be doing about it.
And understanding, and coming back to the team thing there, David, understanding what they want. So as the lessons progress, the wants will be more in line with their needs, you know, from having worked with the instructor.
Okay.
It's a listening and communication process, far more than
that question was perhaps 3 years old. It's been 3 years now, isn't it? Or was it 2 years since?
Yeah, I took mine in the early days in 2014, June 2014.
Yeah.
I think April 2014 when
there
it
are
came
still
out.
There are still quite a lot of people who haven't yet.
Well, let's look to the future. We've had a question come in because this kind of like it kind of follows nicely. One from the past, one from the future. It's Suzanne White who's drinking the. Excuse me. Suzanne White's drinking the white wine tonight. Suzanne says, is a standards check the same as the new ABI Part 3 test, which comes into force soon?
Well, it's a standards check the same as the new ABI Part 3, or vice versa. And I think the answer to that question is just yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Being one to talk a lot, yes.
Yeah.
Which means that students now, I feel at the moment, and don't get me going too much on this, David, because I still, even though I was shaking hands and chatting to Mark today, I'm still very upset about the way it's been implemented, because it disadvantages a lot of people. Some students who live miles and miles away from their test centre are now going to have, you know, like an hour's drive to the test centre to practice, to learn the routes, to do all of this stuff for the Part 3, an hour's drive back. They're going to have to do that several times, you know, before they can do their standard check. Is it the same? Yeah, it's the same. Is it an improvement? Yes, it's an improvement, or at least it will be if they managed it properly. We're welcoming it. I mean, we welcome it from the point of view of the training that's required. We don't welcome it because there aren't enough checks and balances on it from the DVSA side. But yes, we welcome it and we think that it will be a lot easier for a lot of students as well.
Will it make better drivers?
I think the answer to that is, if it works in the way that it's designed to work and the way that I'm working to make it work, for example, the answer is most definitely yes. There is a little bit of a twist in the tail of that. It's that a little bit like the trainee license system over the years. And I know many listeners, many people who are on this webinar tonight will have really benefited from the trainee license. They'll be saying, wait a minute, it was great for me and I wouldn't have qualified without it. Fantastic. I think a lot of those people maybe could pass without the trainee license now. But the problem with the trainee license system, it was open to a lot of abuse. And I suspect there might be similar abuse with this system. But only time will tell. I do sincerely hope that I'm wrong about that. I would love to be wrong about that.
I'd like to cut into Naeem Malik has posted something. I'd like to, if we can give Naeem some instant help, I think that would be beneficial for everybody. I'm assuming Naeem's referring to his part 3, actually. Because he says, I failed twice and I've got my final test in a couple of weeks. Mind you, that could be the standards check as well, couldn't it?
No, it won't be the standards check. It'll be the old check test if it's in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, right. He says, I failed twice and I've got my final test in... oops, so many questions are coming in. Just scroll down.
He's got his test.
Yeah, I failed twice. I've got my final test in a couple of weeks. He's had additional training and feedback was that he was over-instructing. So he understands now what he needs to do is to ask more questions. But can you explain a bit about sample questions and, can you explain a bit about question and answer techniques, please?
Most definitely. But first of all, over-instructing isn't necessarily cured by asking questions. There are lots of ways of getting information. I mean, over-instructing could simply be, sorry, Malik, is it?
It's Naeem Malik. He just written on here, it's a new standard.
I can't pronounce that first, Dave. I apologise for that. First of all, asking questions can be a sort of over-instruction if you're doing too much. That would be my first comment. So often, the first fix for over-instruction is sit back and say nothing for a while and start finding out what needs to be fixed. Okay. Because if you're instructing, if you're doing lots of instruction, you're missing what's going on often, and you're not able to assess what's going on. Is the learner doing something because you're talking a lot, or is the learner doing something because they were going to do it anyway? You know. So the first thing to do before you even start thinking about the sort of questions that you're going to ask is shut up, pardon me, and find out what needs to be done and where the issues are by simply watching. And often the best level of instruction is no instruction, or the best level of questioning is nothing at all, is silence. And I think that the first thing, a lot more silence would be useful. The next thing about questions, the question was specifically about some guidance asking questions. Now, I'm not going to give any specific questions you can ask, because how long is the month, the week, the year? We could go on asking questions about different things forever. But there are one or two key things about asking questions that are very, very important. The first thing is ask one at a time, you know. Okay. What do you think we should do when we come up to this right turn? And have you checked your mirror? And is it important to... I can't answer all those questions at once. People can only deal with one question at a time. And particularly on the move, where you're going to be very, very careful with questions. The next one is to listen to the answer and to wait for the answer. Quite often, as soon as the learner starts
deadly silence,
and straight away, a lot of the people sort of listening to this will be thinking, that's the point at which I'll be jumping in. You know,
John, you've got Adam coming in. Adam, just come in, mate. Don't put your head around the door.
If it doesn't feel like 3 hours while you're waiting for the answer, often it's not long enough. Yeah. And, you know, when you wait longer for the answer, you'll hear the answer a lot more, you know, and the answer to your first question will give you will always give you your next 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 questions. And those will probably be my 2, if you wanted just 2 bits of information for question and answer, that'd be what I'd suggest.
When did you say Naeem had got his next part 3?
He says his new standards test is in 2 weeks.
Standards check or part 3?
He's written new standards test.
Well, if it's a part 3, he won't be doing the new standards check in 2 weeks.
Okay, we've got a few more questions on here. One I can answer. Susan White with a white wine. Do you know when exactly the new test is coming into force? Well, Susan, I was speaking with the DVSA last week, John, and he's told me that the DVSA have got all their ducks in a row. They are just waiting for ministerial approval.
Yeah, an update on that today. I was chatting to Mark earlier today, I think he was a bit disappointed at the conference today. He was hoping to hear something on Friday.
Yeah, they were.
Reading between the lines, he was really hoping to hear. I think he wanted to announce something today. He is expecting to hear something this week, but he's playing the waiting game as well now. There will be a minimum of 21 days after he hears, and it could be longer than that. That's a minimum period of notice. But he's assured me that as soon as he has that information, he will disseminate that information. So we'll know that there are 3 or 4 weeks to go before the change happens.
At the moment, it's expected early November, and you can assume what early November is yourselves. But
yeah, 2020. I feel sorry for them actually. I mean, they get a lot of stick.
For all my giving out, and many of the people who are here tonight will know that I had a lot of complaining and grumbling, and I still hold the fact that a lot of the things I complained about are still totally valid. But I have felt for DVSA, even though I've been battling with them, because they've got a job to do. They've been tasked to do a job. They have their bosses.
Well, John, I'm going to cut you because let's get into standards check.
Yeah.
Right, and before we do, actually, I've got a couple of questions that come up here from Tim Clayton in the Q&A box, which I'm going to answer for you because I don't know the answer, neither do you. And you'll see why I want to answer it.
42.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you don't know the answer, it's 42.
42. Well, Tim says he's an ADI in Birmingham. He's teaching English and French. Would you advise qualifying to instruct in France as well? That's his first question. And what is the standards check regime over there, please? I gather the profession isn't well regarded by the general public. And Tim, all I can say is this: if you want me to put you in touch with a local driving school, I can do. Don't really know too many of them. It's an employed basis over here, and the driving schools also conduct the driving tests. That's as far as my information as it's gone, because it isn't really a marketing opportunity over here for me. So if you want me to put you in touch with a school, I can do. Peter Carey has said, is there a definite date from the DVSA? Sorry, Peter, there isn't yet. All I can say to this, and I'm sure John, Graham, prepare the best that you can. You know, if you want to go for an A grade in some, you know, if you're doing an exam and you hope to, like GCSEs, if you get GCSE grade C, then you get yourself a GCSE. But if you pitch for a C, you're going to get a C. You pitch for an A and tick all the boxes, you got more chance of getting an A. I know it's difficult right now where there's 2 different types of tests going there, but if you tick all boxes, you're going to go in there as a fully comprehensive instructor anyway, the best that you possibly can. So for me, I just think, just tick all boxes. What do you two think?
David, our method and my personal method of ADI training for the last 20 years is a method that the people are just introducing for the standards check part 3 now. If you can prepare for that one, you will pass the old one.
Thanks, John. So prepare for the new, and you will pass the old one.
As long as you understand how the old one works, then you will pass it.
Okay, lovely. I've got loads of questions coming in here. So, is client-centered training important?
Great.
Absolutely. I did a talk today at the agency on problem solving. And this was about getting perspectives, somebody else's perspective on a problem. And that's the client's perspective on the problem. I talked about problems in specific, but it's about us trying to learn, or the client line trying to learn through their own eyes, and us trying to learn through the client's eyes. What we can't do is tell the client what to do in every given situation. But what we can do is help them to understand what to do in every given situation. Responsibility, the ability to respond to situations, and responsibility when driving a lethal weapon. Instruction doesn't do that. It has to be client-centered learning.
Now, this is not only for your standards check, and it is strongly looked for your standards check. It's for good business. You find when you take a client-centered approach, you will get better business. People will be more interested. People will be inclined to pay you more money. They'll be more engaged, and they'll enjoy their lessons more. Just to put a handle on what Graham was saying there, you touched on driving in France. I'd like to think that if I taught a learner driver to drive here, and they had a little bit of experience after passing the test here, they would have the wherewithal to go over the channel to start driving on the other side of the road and to solve the problems for themselves without being totally lost and befuddled.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got a few signposts over here that are a little bit different, a few different rules, but
you have to understand.
But client-centered learning then teaches people to take that responsibility, or teachers helps is perhaps a better word, or facilitators perhaps a better word than teachers even, people to take that responsibility, because it helps them to learn about decision making right from the very early stages of learning.
Can I pause you there? Because Steve,
an example of that, David. You know, we'd love to teach a full syllabus as ADIs, a completely full syllabus, and that might be driving in the fog. But driving on the fog on a motorway in the rush hour, or on a quiet motorway on country lanes, and all these things are impossible, but we can only facilitate the learning to do that.
I want to come in here. Well, I've got loads of questions, by the way, and some questions came a little bit earlier on. There's a question from Ellis Wood that I will raise it later, but I will raise it for you. But Steve Calvert-Garner asks a question right now that really comes into this, and Steve writes, what are your views on encouraging the pupil to analyse their own learning?
100% in agreement. I think that, you know, if you can sit back and some mistakes just happened, some fault if you like, but some mistakes happened, and if we can actually encourage the learner to decide what could be improved, then why not? If we tell the learner what they should be doing, then they have to remember it.
In terms of standards check, it's specifically assessed. Was a learner encouraged to analyse their own and take responsibility for their own learning? It's absolute. I mentioned problem solving a moment ago. Driving is simply a moving puzzle all the time. We're driving into different situations, we're making decisions, and we're solving problems constantly. When people analyze their own learning, when they analyze their own behavior, when they analyze their own issues, they're getting practice at strengthening those decision-making muscles. And absolutely, they should be analyzing their own behavior.
Thank you. I will get to Ellis Wood's question, and Scott Finder's echoed this. Thanks, Ellis and Scott. So I'm going to read this as I see it, because I don't fully comprehend the question, but I know that you two will. I keep hearing people say, talk about risk all the time, and then I hear people who haven't, and the examiner told them, thank you for not going on about risk. What's the truth?
Okay, I think there are a couple of things here. The new system is heavily laden, and DSA writing is heavily laden with the word risk. And I think because of that, people will say risk, 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 risk. Yeah. First of all, there are some learners that you'll frighten to death if you keep talking risk, 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 risk. So it's a matter of thinking about the language that you use. Now, talking about risk all the time, I doubt, to be honest, whether examiners are not happy about issues being raised. What they might not be happy with is hearing this language that goes risk, risk, risk. I mean, for example, you check your mirror, you might say something like, what could affect us from behind, or are there any dangers behind?
Any threats?
Or any threats from behind, rather than what risks are there? What risks are there over your shoulder? What risks are there ahead? And I think often the overuse of the word will often make an examiner think, oh goodness, we've got another one.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think that, you know, if you picture yourselves at your own test centre, picking up the examiner, learner, or a driver's in the car, and what potentially could happen in this road? What hazards could we reasonably expect? That's talking about risk and how.
What sort of problems do we need to solve? You know,
I like your choice in language, because from a marketing point of view, I'm putting a bit of a buying psychology on this. I see risk as danger. And I think when you talk about risk and you talk about danger, people can become a little bit tense, and then you can pass that vibe on. But the way that the language that you're using is far more positive and encouraging.
You've got to address the concept of risk. The risks are there all the time. So we've got to address the concept of risk, but not always with the language. And sometimes you will use the language that says risk. But I think the sort of issue from the question raises is it really suggests that a lot of people are just almost, now this is a strange analogy, but it's almost, and if I was an SEADI, if I was an examiner, I would think this way, almost like a learner driver who's doing a maneuver, let's say, for example, a turn in the road, the current turn in the road, and they're looking both ways, but they're seeing absolutely nothing. They're turning their head left and right, left and right. They're seeing very little. They're just going through the motions. And I think as an SEADI, if I heard somebody saying risk this, risk that, risk the other, risk that, risk that, risk that, apart from the risk of making your learner feel a little uncomfortable, I'd feel that I've got somebody sat there that had read a book and is going through the motions rather than doing the job.
I can almost understand where the language has come from, David, because there is a section heading on the standards check, risk management, and a note underneath saying, did the trainer score 7 or less on risk management? If yes, then it's a fail. So all of a sudden, risk becomes part of it. But the examiner likes to hear different words, helping the pupil analyse their own hazards and threats and risks to them, if you like.
And of course, if I'm talking about risk all the time, or if I'm talking about anything all the time, I'm ceasing to be client-centered. I'm shifting to my agenda. I'm starting to be very trainer-centric, rather than thinking about what's the situation, what's the problem that this learner needs to be understanding.
Can I pause you back there then? Because I'd like to bring in 2 questions that I think would follow on nicely. One's from Jeff Stevenson, and the one's from Alan Hall. So I give both questions at the same time because you're not driving, and I know you can handle both questions.
I've got 2 ears.
I was listening.
I see that you were listening then, David.
Adam's sending me notes. Alan says, can you define CCL? He could do with knowing that because he's only passed his part 3 a few months ago. And then Jeff Stevenson, this is where it all entwines together. Thanks, Jeff, for this. This is a great question, by the way. I resonate with this. 95% of my learners have no interest in answering questions. They want to be instructed by the person they are paying. This does not fit with the client-centered model. How do you get a completely mute pupil to be more involved? So there's 2 questions, and it kind of flows on where we're going.
If I can just pipe in here a little bit. If you think of the standard routine, mirror, signal, position, speed, and look, we could almost teach that by rote. Check your mirrors, put your signal on, take this position, bring your speed down, select the right gear, look right, look left, gas bike, go. And there isn't any reason the pupil should know why they're doing those things. They can actually do it by rote. And I've had customers turn up for me that learn that by rote. Give them a peculiar situation and they haven't got a clue what to do.
Yeah.
Client-centered learning, rather than check your mirrors, are there any threats behind? Yeah. Is there a motorbike coming up the right or the left-hand side? To get them to look into the mirrors.
It's difficult to answer this question, David, without me being very brutal. And I think we have to be very brutal. If 95%, and my apologies in advance if this alienates you or puts you back up, but if 95% of your clients are not answering or don't want to answer questions, you need to start learning about how to ask questions.
I don't think that's going to put anybody's back up. I think it's a really good thing. And people come on these webinars tonight and just ask a question, but the other people on here tonight will be thinking, you know what, I'm in the same boat.
If that's the situation, you might feel that you're engaging, but you're not fully engaging with that customer. You might be engaging with them, you might have good rapport, you might be engaging with them when you're talking about football, you might be engaging with them when you talk about what they've done in the last week. You might have a great business where your customers love you. But when they're not able to answer those questions that are critical in the driving situation, or whether they snap back with a don't know, you know. What do you think, what does the red traffic light mean? Don't know. Straight away, that there is a reason that people will not answer questions. Often, if I go back to my own school experience, the moment I spoke up in class, I usually got thrown out of the room or something. I'd get into trouble. And the teacher-student relationship, you know, get out of my class, you're too stupid to be in my class, you know, that sort of thing. And I was very reluctant for years. I left school at 15 years old, and I came into a world of work and a world of not work and a world of different things that I did. And I would be reluctant to answer questions. When people would ask me questions, I would be reluctant to answer questions in case I gave the wrong answer. You know, now that's one of the many reasons that people don't answer questions, but it's one of the biggest reasons that people don't answer questions. And it is so easy to say, oh, well, you tell me, or to say, oh, well, I don't know. That is so easy. But, and it, you know what's even easier? It's even easier to give them the answer. So yeah. If somebody said to me, I don't know, rather than saying, well, this is the answer, I'd be inclined to say, well, what needs to happen for you to know?
This links in with the question by William Meehan. I'm sorry to cut you, but I want to keep your thoughts there, John, because William Meehan's got a question. He says, what are your views on coaching-led approach? And you're doing this right now, so please, John, continue.
First of all, it's important to understand that Q&A and coaching are not the same thing, but this is more of a coaching-led approach. Yeah, to help the learner, first of all, if I've got 95% of my learners not answering questions, I'd first of all point the finger at myself. You know, what am I doing? What could I do differently? I then want to look at my clientele generally to think, you know, oh, do I work in a very working class, very downtrodden area where people have very low self-esteem? Do I have a lot of customers like that? I'd be looking for the reason for that, rather than thinking that they just want me to tell them what to do and pay me money. I think
that's really good you said that.
I think if you explain to the learner that, look, you'll probably learn to drive and it will cost you 30% less if we do it my way.
John, it's really good that you said that, because Jeff's written a reply on here. He says, it's not my questioning style, it's the way of 17-year-old kids. And as he was writing that, I was thinking something, and you were saying about the area where we are. I know lots of driving instructors who love 17-year-old kids because all they do is bleeding talk. And you know, and they want to get engaged, and I do feel that sometimes you can find a crop of boosters that don't want to engage and don't want to ask questions, and it might have come from
the first point there is, when I'm saying I'm going to be brutal, it doesn't mean I'm having a go at anybody.
No, not at all.
Any response I give will be factual in that respect. So yes, some 17-year-olds, by their very nature, whether they're from lowest, because there are lots of other reasons as well that people might be reluctant to answer questions. But for whatever reason, it doesn't mean that 17-year-olds won't answer questions. And with all due respect to your question style, it might be excellent, but if it's not getting through to those 17-year-olds, it needs to be tweaked. And it might only just take a little tweak. You know, things like sometimes you'll dig a bit beyond the driving. I mean, I might say to somebody, well, I don't know, or you tell me. Well, what do I need to tell you to help you to learn this? Oh, well, you're doing it again, John. Why don't you just tell me the answer? Well, okay, let's think about why I don't tell you the answer. How will it benefit you when you're on your driving test and this unusual thing happens and I haven't given you an answer for that one? How are you going to work it out for yourself? You know, you've got to engage them in the process, in the learning process, in the conversation. And it can be tough work with some.
So what you're talking about here then, in the standards check, because this is a standards check webinar, we're talking about coaching, but the two are so closely entwined. Yeah. You're talking about creating empowerment, aren't you?
Absolutely. Which is a team. Unless you're both, I talked about a team earlier on, and this is so important, the standards check, for the examiner to see this. If you're not both equal in that team and you're not both having equal input into the process of learning, then it's not a team. Then it's instructor-led. Once the scale starts tipping back to being instructor-led again. So you've got to primarily keep in your mind, what's my job in the team, what's the learner's job in the team.
And if you have got a pupil that's struggling to answer questions for whatever reason, the last thing you want to do is take them to a standards check.
Which is very interesting. I don't know if any questions have come up yet, David, about how do I choose my pupil, but there's a great answer about how not to choose your pupil.
Okay, lovely. Let me run on to something a little bit different. So I like to chop and change to keep the balance going in different ways. Peter Blight, do we have a definitive sat-nav model for the standards check yet?
Oh, I forget what it's called.
What is
it? Yes, there is.
It's TomTom Start.
Okay. My follow-up question to that is, are there any brown envelopes?
TomTom Start 52.
Have any brown envelopes been passed to secure that contract, Your Honour?
Well, I think that there are a few problems with it as well. Apparently, it says go straight over the roundabout and things like that, and there is a software fix coming from TomTom.
Everybody knows that the proper word is island. So.
Yeah. Apparently, I'm not an expert. I'm not well up on it. Apparently, if you have one of these and you're unhappy with the wording, if you get the latest software update onto it, it should solve the problem. The wording that's on the model that's in the shops at the moment is slightly different from the one that DVSA evaluated.
Okay.
But they've been in conversation with TomTom to look at this.
So following on from what you said a moment ago about selecting the right pupil or not selecting the right pupil. So here, Abbas, thanks here, and thanks for joining in tonight. He actually asked this question 15 minutes ago, but I've been waiting for the appropriate time. Yeah. Here asks, hi David, can you please ask them what's the best way to prepare to get a grade A?
Well, the first one is spend 20 quid with us and get the full set of videos.
Oh my God, what a plug.
Look, seriously.
What's the best way to prepare? Well, the first thing is you do it 3 years before the standards check when you get your grade A. That's when you start. People go on at me saying, well, John, everybody can't be perfect. Well, why the hell not? You set your you set your standards high, and you start giving yourself a little bit of time every week to do some CPD, whether it's reading some of my stuff, reading somebody else's stuff, reading an article in a magazine, reading an article on the internet, looking up some psychology stuff on the internet. It doesn't matter what it is, just looking up stuff randomly about teaching and starting to generally understand the tasks that you're doing. Because the best way to do a grade A, to get a grade A on your standards check, is to deliver a grade A lesson to every single learner, the people that actually pay you to deliver a grade A lesson to them every single day. What's the best way to get it?
Excuse me. Sorry.
Bless you, David.
I think one of the things is initially to download the form anyway, the standards check 1 form, the SC1 form.
Great.
Have a look through it and see what the requirement is for the test itself.
If you haven't done that, the SC1 form comes along with some brief guidance notes which should tell you a little bit about the way the standards check's marked and graded. And if you just put in standards check marking form into Google, if you don't already have one, just put that in and it'll take you straight to the...
James, you know what? I see loads of help by well-meaning people on Facebook about the SC. People say I've got it tomorrow or next week or what have you not. That's the first time I've ever heard or seen anybody say, download the form.
Well, you're going for test. I mean, this webinar is about the standards check. Now, it's for me, it's impossible to separate that from good teaching practice because good teaching practice is where I come from. But if you're going for any exam, it's like any other exam. You've got to prepare for that exam and you've got to give yourself the best opportunity. Now, I often will say depending on who asks me, I'll just say, select the customer, whichever customer you happen to have on that day at that time, take them. But I qualify that with depending upon who's asking me, because there are some people out there who, for whatever reason, they're going to get nervous on the exam. They didn't do so well in the old check test or whatever. I would say be very careful about the customer you select. Now, I'm not suggesting, and I don't suggest that people should rehearse the lesson. I know some people will and some people do. The problem with rehearsing the lesson is when something goes wrong, you get really thrown off balance. The learner gets thrown off balance and you get thrown off balance, and that can be disastrous. But what I will say is, first of all, select somebody who's going to turn up. The last thing you want is your standards check day and somebody ringing up saying, I've got a problem, I can't do my lesson today, which probably means I'm nervous about having an examiner in the back and I really wanted to do it to help you out, but I'm afraid I can't. But they'll never say that to you. So, and have a backup as well. So there are two things there. Choose somebody who's going to turn up and have a backup.
One of the things that seems to be happening, David, as well, is from what the statistics that we've seen, is that about 70% of standards checks are being taken with full license holders.
That's got to be verified, yeah, but we suspect that.
What percentage?
70%.
We think it could be
70. In the last 3 months. And that's in the last 3 months, as far as we can see. There's been a 70%. Yeah, so you're removing some of the variables out of the equation.
So I think you've got to ask yourself as well, David, what do I want to get from my standards check? Do I want to get an ego boost of getting an A by taking my archetypal full license holder in an automatic car on a motorway? Or do I want to get something that I really value within myself and I feel I've earned? Now, I'm not making a value or judgment on either of those things, but they're things you need to consider when you're going in for your standards check, you know. And there will be a slightly different approach and a slightly different choice of pupil based upon your own wants or needs. So you've got to ask yourself, why do I want my A and how do I want to get my A?
I've done quite a bit of ADI standards check training with people that have failed their standards check. And one of the things that comes through very strongly is that they will ask the pupil what they want to achieve or agree with the pupil what they want to achieve. Let's say reverse left, just as an example. And on the drive from the test centre, the pupil drives too close to the car in front, shaves a vehicle that's parked or has a meeting problem. And it's all completely ignored for doing this left reverse because that's what the pupil wants to do. You cannot ignore those things.
So whoever you choose, you've still got to deal with the issues. So, but coming back to the choice, somebody who will turn up, a backup plan. I would always suggest you've got a backup plan for a learner because you can't do a role-based standards check. That's not an option. Somebody you get on well with. So I would suggest a customer.
Another ADI.
Well,
yeah. Well, nobody will know, will they?
A customer that you've got a good flowing relationship with, a customer that doesn't fall apart when they screw things up, because they're going to have this superior examiner in the back, which is the way a lot of people would see it. So you want somebody that you've got a comfortable flowing relationship with, and that's not always your best customer, incidentally.
And Dominica, by the way, because this links in nicely. Thanks again, Dominica, for asking your questions. How will you advise someone who is before first standard check? I think Dominica's asking, it's going to be her first standards check. How do you prepare? She asks here, what's a good topic to prepare?
The topic that fits the learner on the day.
Knew you were going to say that. That's why I got the question right now.
But I've got a bit of advice here. Look, we do meet people who have failed the standards check. I can't say piss poor, can I? I can't swear. I got into trouble for swearing earlier.
No, it's entirely up to you. It's your reputation, not mine. By the way, everybody, you buy a ticket for the Driving Instructors Business Summit tonight. He can look his standard stuff.
There's some very common reasons for failing standards check, but you have to score less than 32, and you've got to be pretty. It's got to be pretty diabolical from start to finish to do that. To answer the question, my advice would be, don't fret about it. Go along and do it. See how you get on and take the examiner's advice on board. Then use the examiner's advice as a basis for your future planning and for that next standards check that's going to come. Now, if you've not got a grade A, that next standard check might come, and I've got a little bit more news here, by the way. The next standard check might come in a couple of years or so. If you've got a grade A, it's going to be 4 years. The bit of news that was clarified again today is that DVSA have looked at standards checks on demand. They did some costings. They've worked out how they want to do it. But because there's so much on the plate at the moment, and the election getting in the way and Brexit getting in the way, it's gone onto the back burner. It will be revived. They have got plans, but there isn't any timescale yet. But they've looked at it. They've looked at how it might work. So, for example, an instructor who's only getting one standard check in the last 4 years or something might pay less for a standard check than somebody who's had 2 standards checks. So it will balance out to be a fair system for everybody. But it looks like they are in favour, and they do want to offer us standards checks on demand. So when that comes along, and there's still no time scale yet, so whether it's 6 months or 6 years, I have absolutely no idea.
Okay, lovely.
But, if somebody then got a B and they wanted an A because they needed it for fleet work or for whatever it is they need, they could pay for a standards check, go and have another shot.
I like the idea of that. Look, Graham, so I've got a few questions that are coming in from PDIs.
Can I just offer a bit of advice, David, first about
you go for it.
Standards check and the pupil? Pick a pupil. The route planning is so important. Don't pick a route that exceeds the capability of your pupil. Know where you're going, know where to go to fix problems that come off the route, and get back on the route whenever you can. So know the pupil's capability and know the route you're going to take them on.
And I think that actually answers that question in terms of what's a good pupil to take. I don't think we just answered what's a good pupil to take, but I think Graham answered quite succinctly what to do with that pupil.
You're planning it.
And so whoever you take on that basis will be a good pupil to take.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I've got a few questions that come in from PDIs and newly qualified ADIs, because I know these people. So without going through the names, I'm going to run through these questions now. And some of them will be yes, no answers, pretty much. Excuse me, I should stop drinking wine. I should have some more. On the standards check test, do you have to mention that you have got dual controls and you will use it as necessary? I haven't done a standards check test yet, but a few instructors have told me to say that. That's one question. Another question is, what happens if you fail your standards check? And another question, because there's a hat trick of these. Yeah, no, there isn't. That's a 2. I must have deleted the one.
We're going to have to go back to the one question at once rule, David.
Okay, on the standards check.
You have to mention that I've got dual controls and that I'll use them. No.
Right, okay.
Do any harm to mention it? No.
Okay, fine. So there's no tick box to the driver. So if you don't mention it, the examiner's not going to go.
Oh, I didn't mention that. No.
And you may be taking a full license holder in the client's car.
Yeah.
Good point.
So
what happens if you fail your standards check?
What happens if you fail your standards check? You get another. What's the time scale now?
3 months. You get
within 3 months.
Yeah.
You get another standards check.
Okay.
And it's the same rules as the old check test, which is 3 strikes and you're out. So if you fail 3 standards checks, you're off the register until you requalify.
My advice is really, don't just start the training 2 weeks before the standards check.
Oh no, don't.
Put everything into plan now, and become a client-centered learning ADI.
There's a question coming online, guys. It's been asked following the question about dual controls.
Mm-hmm.
How does the examiner expect you to talk about the sharing of the responsibility?
How does the examiner expect you to talk about the sharing of responsibility? That was it's hiding.
He's hiding. It covers up the smart driving poster, so we've got him out of the room.
The question was, how does the examiner expect you to talk about sharing the responsibility for risk, effectively?
On the back of the question about the dual controls.
On the back of the question about dual controls.
Yes,
right.
Adam.
Well. First of all, your learner should know that in a dire situation you have dual controls, but that's different from do I have to mention it on my standards check, first of all. But I employ something, and I've written extensively about something that I call job sharing, and this is what ties into one of the main reasons that people fail the standards check. One of the main reasons that people fail the standards check is because in fact, two of the main reasons that people fail is because they don't give sufficient feedback after a safety critical incident, and they don't give sufficient feedback full stop. But feedback is also about sharing information. So for example, coming on to that question, if I stop and discuss an issue, something that's gone well, something that's gone badly, something that's whatever, and then I move off again, before I move off, I'm always going to do something that I call job sharing. Remember, we're a team, and in a team, everybody knows their task and everybody knows their job. And job sharing is simply about making it very clear, okay, so we've just had a chat. We've just agreed we're going to go around that roundabout another 3 times. We've agreed that for the first time round the roundabout, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to be there to help you if this happens. For the second time round, if you feel good after the first time, we're going to give you the option of you taking that role and responsibility and so on. And just make it very, very clear. But that process, whether it's about whether you would use the dual control or whether you would say, I will tell you when to put the signal on, if that's what you wish, that process should be happening very often throughout every single lesson. Very often you should be making sure that your learner's not guessing about what's going to happen, so that when you come up to the next junction, the learner's not sitting there thinking, is he going to tell me? Do I have to do this on my own? What happens if that car pulls out? The learner should know that, because that's part of the plan that you've agreed, part of the job that you're sharing.
If I can give an example of that, if we take the local test centre here, it's on a very busy industrial estate, and you've got a learner that's only driven on this industrial estate a couple of times. The examiner gets in the back of the car and you agree that you're going to do some defensive driving, let's say. And you're about to set off on this busy road on this industrial estate. You might say to the learner, okay, you've driven up here before. How do you feel about doing this on your own? And if I need to step in and help you, I will, maybe with the dual controls or with the steering, or just to remind you about things. How do you feel about that? And that would be enough for the examiner to see that you're sharing the responsibility for risk.
But I think the key thing is, I think the key thing is there that the learner knows what to expect. All the time, no surprises because if my learner's not expecting me to come in with a question, or not expecting me to come in with an instruction, or not expecting me to do something else, and then I suddenly do it, it's going to take them half a second to respond to the fact that I've done something. Then they've got to process that information. Now at 30 miles an hour, we're another 90 feet down the road, and everything's getting messy. The risk is exacerbated, and we have problems. Now, I'm not sure if I answered the question that was asked, but I think I did.
Well, I've got another question that's quite similar to what you've just been talking about there, Graham, yourself. Janet, you asked this question quite some time ago, and I've only just got to it. I'm really sorry, but I'm just trying to fit it in appropriately. She says that her Top Cat, every time I see TC, I always think of Top Cat, not test centre. Her test centre's in Chichester, and she's surrounded by dual carriageways with very busy roundabouts with 3-lane entries. If on the standards check I don't have a very advanced learner available, I'm going to be spending 10 minutes getting to and from a quieter area to conduct the lesson. Will that be acceptable, given I've only got an hour for the SC?
I don't know where the test centre is in Chichester now, but I worked in Chichester for probably 6 or 7 years. I had a driving school, maybe longer than that in Chichester. And it used to be near the traffic lights on the dual carriageway. Maybe the traffic lights aren't anymore. 10 minutes, yeah, I could see that if the test centre is where it used to be, it would probably take about 10 minutes to drive out to a quiet area. The answer is, I've asked this question specifically to the DVSA. How much time do you feel, and I actually answered it in respect to the new Part 3, but it's the same thing, it's the same answer. How much time would you feel would be acceptable, and are you prepared to accept? And they won't give a straight answer. They'll beat about the bush and they won't give a straight answer. But I think 10 minutes each way is acceptable, depending upon how you use the 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it depends on what you do with that time.
So if that 10 minutes you're going to be a taxi driver, you can expect to get a pretty low grade at the end of the day. If that 10 minutes is spent in discussion, in demonstration, let's take the extreme of, say, a moving off and stopping lesson. During that 10 minutes, I'd probably pull up and stop a couple of times and just demonstrate the moving off. So all the briefing and everything is done on the move by the time we arrive at location. So
you're using that time.
Yeah, so you use the time value. And then on the way back, you deconstruct the lesson. So there should be virtually no need for a recap when you get back to the test centre. Just on time, incidentally, I've only got an hour with the examiner. It's highly unlikely that you will have an hour on the road moving.
Okay, cool. I've got another question. Ashley Ellis.
Just add a bit to that, David.
Right.
What said is that route planning and picking the correct pupil are fundamental to scoring a high grade. Yeah, if you've got to drive 10 minutes somewhere, there isn't any reason why you can't get a good grade, an A grade. But if you can pick a pupil that's capable of driving that 10 minutes, then you're setting yourself in good stead.
That's a good point.
Thank you, Graham. So Ashley Ellis. Now, Ashley Ellis uses a bit of an abbreviation here, so I'm going to guess for RM. I guess RM is reverse manoeuvre. Do you think it would be an instant fail under RM if pupil mounted pavement because you didn't get to duals in time?
Right, I think risk management we're talking about.
Risk management, of course.
But I mean, you wouldn't be risk managing on the reverse manoeuvre if that happened, David. So pretty good guess there, mate.
Right on the J turn.
I think it's fair comment from David. I'm on your side as well. It could be reverse manoeuvre on a curb.
Adam whispered in my ear. So if I didn't get to the dual controls in time, by the time we're hitting the footpath, I'm going to be brutal. That problem didn't start when we hit the footpath and got to the duals. That problem started 100 metres back up the road, or 15 minutes ago in the lesson. Because we're back to route planning, task management planning. If that learner is hitting the curb, they're either not ready for that situation
on that route,
or they're not ready for that situation on that route.
Maybe if they've gone to pieces or something, then it's time to stop the car and analyse what that lesson's about and change the lesson completely.
And there's something interesting here. When again, I often sound brutal when I give out like that, but when I say it could have been 100 yards up the road or 15 minutes earlier, quite often I find when I've sat with instructors who have a problematic pupil, the instructor is so busy looking out of the windscreen trying to firefight that he misses all the clues that the learner is sat there petrified, and not doing any mirror checks, staring dead ahead, and not noticing all the symptoms that are inevitably going to lead to some kind of problem like that. Now, would the examiner mark you that? Most definitely. Because you've not controlled the situation. You've not managed the risk I would say, in good time, not just in the moment.
It's hard to answer the question specifically without knowing the complete situation.
Yes, if somebody were to give us an example and say, I failed because...
If this child run out and they ran up the curb because they swerved, maybe,
The examiner might say, well, great, you did very well to do what you did there. So it really...
5 points for a child, isn't it?
Depends on the context.
I've got a few points down here rather than questions. I'll answer the first one. Kevin Graham says you can always tell when you've asked the crap question. Yeah, Kevin, you're right, because she says yes and you've got to pay for a ring.
There aren't any crap questions.
Tim says...
Except for that one.
Tim says, couldn't agree more with the importance of pithy language. Ideally... My God, Tim, what a word you've given me tonight to do after a couple of drinks. Couldn't agree more with the importance of pithy language, ideally monosyllables. Threat, not challenge. Move, not manoeuvre. Gas bike go. ORU, VRU, XRU, problem solving on the go. That's more of a statement. He follows on by saying, we're fools to ourselves if we accept the title instructor. These days, if not always, we are facilitator or just plain teacher. Because we all know how much broader that job title is these days.
That's fantastic. I must admit, I do tend to use the word instructor as a generic term for the very reason that it's a term that people understand when they're reading stuff I write or when I'm talking. But the sentiment behind it is teacher, is facilitator, and I couldn't agree more with that.
Creators of responsibility.
That is fantastic.
Thank you. Susan White, I think you'll answer this very quickly. Graham, I'm going to give you this question. How do you choose... Look, you might look like Marvin.
Yeah, okay.
How do you choose a pupil to take on your Part 3 test if you've only got one?
There's a big discussion about that, but have a backup plan of maybe a full license holder somewhere.
The question on Facebook has come in. I've got a full license holder, but he's my son. Is that all right?
Of course, yeah. The license of the pupil, if you like, is never checked. They won't know who he is, what they're doing. They can be a full license holder.
What we're not suggesting here is that you take your full license holder son along and pretend
he's a learner.
We're not suggesting that.
Yeah, there is. No, I mean,
it's our dad halfway through.
There are many instances where family members have been used, full license holders, to teach dual carriageways, roundabouts, that sort of thing, and it removes some of the risk of the pupil not turning up. My only word of caution is just a very generic. There's absolutely no problem with taking it. I hesitate at saying spouse, but or partner, but there's absolutely no problem. But be aware of family issues, family tensions that can come out if things are a bit dodgy. Make sure that you've got the kind of relationship that will withstand that.
Okay, so Alan Foster.
I'm not sure that the DVSA can tell the difference between a well-rehearsed lesson and a contrived one.
Well, they might say
a well-rehearsed lesson with a family member. You've got plenty of opportunities to go and practice.
Yes, that's a great benefit of having a family member.
The thing is, if you have a family member and you fail, who's in the doghouse?
Always blame the family member. Yeah.
Alan Foster, he says, Alan Foster's taken his Part 3. He says, can I use an ADI friend as my student for my Part 3?
No.
You can use a Part 1 student, a Part 2 student. You can't use anybody who's past Part 2.
Top question, Alan.
ADI.
Thanks very much for that. So let me go down here. Some more questions. Dominica, you said it's teamwork, prepare, process. Is it better to prepare a pupil for the standards check or just do it as a normal lesson?
My advice would be ideally just do it as a normal lesson. I mentioned earlier, don't rehearse it. But if you're in the process of working as a team together with your learner, something else I mentioned earlier is that lesson has normally been determined the lesson before. Now, that interestingly, that has brought up a slightly unrelated, a related point, which I talk about planning the lesson the week before or the hour before or whatever. One, because the learner can do a bit of homework, a bit of reading, watching videos, some stuff like that. But on the standards check day, oftentimes you'll be picking up your learner and doing maybe an hour with them or 40 minutes with them or something before the examiner gets in the car. It's very, very important that, let's say you're going to do 40 minutes, you pick your learner up, you're going to drive around for 40 minutes. It's very, very important, I would say, to park up 10 minutes, after half an hour and say, okay, let's see where we're at. Let's see where we're going forward to this. Let's see if we're still going to work on this thing the same. And then start the standards check lesson with the examiner in the car as a brand new lesson, as if they're coming in from last week. Because the examiner wants to, obviously he doesn't want you to say hello, how are you, because he knows you've turned up with a customer, but he wants to see a full lesson. He wants to see a full process from the beginning to the end of the lesson. Now, some of that might just be saying, right, as we've just been discussing in the last half hour, this is what we're going to do, and you've agreed with me and I've agreed with you, and we're going to do this. That might be sufficient, but even if you give the examiner a few words and notes beforehand, the examiner can't assume anything. He needs to see in a full lesson.
Can I make a bit of a summary?
It doesn't need to be elaborate. It doesn't need to be elaborate.
It could be, yes, a summary would be fine.
No, I think you misheard me. I was saying, could I make a bit of a summary here?
Sorry.
There's a few people asking questions about what would be the ideal driving lesson that would perform well on an SC, but the message that I'm getting from you, it's not what you teach or set out to teach on the SC. It's about the person. It's about the route going together and making sure that you can maximize the time and then applying your skills within that framework. Would that be about right?
If you're asking yourself the question, what would be a good lesson or the ideal lesson, you're starting from an instructor-centered perspective.
Right.
Not a client-centered perspective. So the first thing you've got to do is try to understand a little bit deeper within yourself, what does client-centered mean? And so, yes, the way you summarised that was pretty well spot on, David. I was quite impressed.
Yeah. What does the learner need to do next? What is the agreement with the learner?
So, regardless, I mean, learning is a process. It's not based. It's not a person, and it's not a subject. It's a process where certain things happen. I say something or explain something. You do something. I respond to that. I help you with that. I find out what you need for that. Whether you're teaching the cooking or my wife tries to teach me to use a washing machine. Oh no, that was another sexist thing. Or whether you're teaching driving, it doesn't really matter. It's a process. And so what's more important is having somebody along with you that you're comfortable with and who's comfortable with you.
Let's use cooking for an example, right? When you're cooking, my wife loves cooking, she loves baking, and the end product is to have a great cake. Absolutely. The first thing she doesn't think about is, what cake tin am I going to use?
No.
She actually looks at the ingredients and the process of putting it together, and I feel that if you're looking for the ideal driving lesson, you're looking for the ideal cake tin, and that's the wrong way around.
And I think that's a great analogy. I mean, I like cooking. It relaxes me a little bit when I'm not working. Okay, I do have some time off. And I know pretty well what I'm doing. Some things might be in the dishwasher. I've got the recipe or I've got it in my head. I'll be in the kitchen and I won't always cook it in the same pot, in the same pan, in the whatever. I'll take whatever's to hand to fit that recipe and to fit what's needed.
I'm going to screw this analogy up by saying if you have rubbish ingredients, you're going to get a rubbish cake.
Well, I think that analogy still stands.
Okay, well, I've got another question. Claire, I don't know your surname. It says Claire asked, so I'm going to pretend that Claire's surname is asked. Sorry. Should you do a first-time briefing for an SC, like an emergency stop or reverse park, etc.?
If there's something implicit in that, or assumed in that I'm not quite sure about. You see. First of all, the word briefing, I'm uncomfortable with because I think should I do a briefing? That combination of words, I'm a little uncomfortable with because my answer to that would be, first of all, if you're doing a subject for the first time with somebody, that's absolutely fine for your standards check, with a slight proviso, and they're not keen on manoeuvres because they don't feel. It doesn't mean you can't do one. But they don't. You probably have to work a bit harder to get your A with a maneuver.
I think that. Go on, sorry, John.
But coming back to my point, if the learner needs a briefing, yes, it's perfectly okay to go along and give a briefing for a new subject. But the learner might not need a briefing. It might be a demonstration. It might be a certain type of demonstration. It might be a quiz on a video that they've watched.
Okay.
So that's why I'm being a bit pedantic about the word briefing there. But I think the question is, if I understand the question correctly from Claire, is that can I do a virgin subject with this customer? You know, can we do left turns for the first time? Can we do an emergency stop for the first time or whatever? Yeah. Just going back to the manoeuvres thing, and the emergency stop would fall into that, I think. Again, if you're going to choose a maneuver, make sure you do a fully rounded lesson. Make sure your lesson includes stuff before the maneuver about why would this be appropriate? Where would this be appropriate? Why would it not be appropriate on this road that we're at the moment?
Yeah. Think about speed awareness, hazard planning, that sort of thing.
So you don't just say, right, we're going to do a turn in the road, turn up, do a turn in the road, disappear again.
Because you're doing the thinking for the person.
Yeah, I think that as part of this client-centered approach as well, David and Claire, that if you say to the learner, a learner says, I'd like to learn how to do emergency stop today. So how would you like to do this? Or we can do a briefing, or I can demonstrate it to you, or you can have a go by yourself. How would you like to learn how to do this? And let the learner decide what's best for them, rather than the instructor saying, I'm going to give you a briefing. Yeah.
And with that particular example, the first 25 minutes of my lesson, I think, will be spent on how do we avoid the need to do an emergency
absolutely,
stop.
yeah. So what are the hazards here? What should we do about risk planning, and what are we going to do about these hazards? What should our speed be?
So what you're doing here is
about standard shit, David. And my advice would be, whilst you can, they say on the form here, anybody who downloads and has a look at the form who hasn't already done so, will see that there's a list of topics here. These aren't the topics you have to choose from. These are just topics that enable the examiner to record what he's seen. He might tick 2 or 3 or 4 of those boxes. It's just to give them some sort of idea what people are presenting with. And one of the things it says there is recap an emergency stop or recap a maneuver. And the reason they put recap on there is because their feeling is that if you just do a maneuver or you just do an emergency stop, they feel that it's not enough for you to demonstrate your skill and to effectively fill a full lesson. I think, and I've got to be careful that this isn't inferred incorrectly by many ADIs, but I think that's because the DVSA have very rarely seen what I would call a really good manoeuvres lesson. Like I said, the first 25 minutes of emergency stop lesson for me would be understanding emergency stops and why we should be avoiding them.
Yeah, so you could drive down the street with cars parked both sides and talk about the risk and what should the speed be, because the only option you have is an emergency stop, no swerving. You
could get a grade A and you could get a 52 doing emergency stop, doing a manoeuvre. I wouldn't recommend that you do, because you've got to work hard for it.
Okay, I've got a lot of questions in the chat box, but a few questions have just flown in on the Q&A box. So I'm going to go through all of them because they're kind of question stroke statements and they're all about briefings really. Ashley Ellis, not really about briefing, but in summary, the subject isn't important as long as it works for the pupil. That's what Ashley says.
Magic.
Okay, nods. Anonymous attendee. So it's fair to say you have to be able to adapt the lesson as you go along and try and get back on track if you manage the risk involved and you make sure learning has taken place.
David, can I just come in with a very quick point there?
Do it.
Another thing that I often teach about and talk about is related to theming or I call framing of lessons. Mm-hmm. Lessons needn't go completely off track. If, for example, we were doing, and I'll use a turn in a road lesson for an example. I'll make a very simplistic example. If I'm doing on the way to do a turn in the road lesson and my learner stalls 3 times, I'm going to address that stalling. I'm going to pull up and practice. It should never happen. It's a crazy analogy, but it helps me explain it. I'm going to pull up and I'm going to practice the moving off to make sure we don't get the stalling before we do the turn in the road, if we do the turn in the road. But I'm not necessarily going to change my whole lesson plan. I'm going to relate everything I do to the turn in the road. So anything that happens in the lesson, I'm going to relate to the turn in the road. So getting the lesson back on plan, you don't necessarily have to leave your plan. You just have to relate. So somebody comes too fast up to a junction and you're on a pedestrian crossing lesson. Well, you can't ignore the too fast up to a junction, but you can say, now, today's lesson, we're doing pedestrian crossings. And one of the most important things is speed on approach. And you can relate the thing. So you can keep your plan pretty tight, even when you're dealing with things that have gone off track a little bit. So
thank you. I do need to say, by the way, I've had a message come up from my computer to say my internet's a bit unstable. So if I do disappear, please continue. It's fair to say they've got to be able to adapt the lesson as you go along.
Yeah.
Get back on track. Brilliant.
That is important.
Scott Finley says, I've always been told they don't like long briefings on standards checks as they want to see you at work on the move. So like John and Graham said, avoid these kind of lessons.
Well, first of all, I'd say, what's a long briefing? I mean, if we go back to old part 3, if I were teaching somebody junctions, I would be teaching them to turn left, maybe major to minor. That would be a 3 or 4 minute briefing. I would then maybe teach them to emerge. That would be another 2 or 3 minute briefing. I might move on to turning right. That'd be another 2 minute briefing. What I would never, roundabouts, great example. I would never give a roundabout briefing where I'm talking about turning left, going ahead and turning right. If I was giving a briefing, I'd say, let's talk about turning left and then go and do something. So keep your briefing short. Anyway, the learner will appreciate it a lot more.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So let me go into the chat box here. This one, I'm gonna read this out. You'll see how it goes. My last check was 7 years ago, and he received a 2. Do I need to change my style of instruction to pass the new standards check?
Probably, maybe. Don't know until we see. But yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't quite understand the question, because if you receive...
No, I was hoping that you could fill some gaps in the book. Janet Lambert, if you remember we were talking about Jules earlier, dual controls, she writes, but isn't the fact you have Jules relevant to the responsibility of risk? You're providing a safe environment for the learning to take place.
It's about the responsibility of sharing the risk. So, you know, if you're going to drive along this road and you're going to allow the pupil to take 90% of the risk and only intervene when it's necessary by using the dual controls or the steering or whatever.
Thank you. Sorry, John.
And it's after once you know a learner and you presumably turn it up with somebody you know, it's an accepted. It's something you've already discussed with the learner and they know they're in a car with dual control. If goodness forbid, if you're expecting to use your dual controls more than once a month, start looking at your route planning. In fact, more than once every 6 months. The dual control should go rusty.
I feel the question's more about what should I tell the examiner? I think it's about saying to the examiner and helping the examiner see the responsibility of risk is being shared between you. Who's going to do what?
There's been a comment online, gents, from Nigel Slater.
Oh,
he likes Chelsea.
Hello, Nigel.
Specifically regarding dual controls, he says you're wrong. Good ADIs have lost marks for not mentioning dual controls, and even with full license holders, fact. And I think it specifically relates to the point that you're talking about discussing risk.
I'm still not sure I agree, Nigel.
Well, I took a guy in fleet without dual controls, so I didn't mention them. Okay.
Anonymous 10D has asked, I've been out of the game for a few years due to illness. Any advice on how I should get back into business? Thank you. Well, my first 2 points are make sure you're doing the job right and contact me for marketing. I'll do the website and SEO for you. John, Graham, what are your thoughts?
Contact Smart Driving instead.
Get David's marketing stuff, get standards check success from Smart Driving and use it as a starting point.
Yeah, look, get John, get Smart Driving's videos. Make sure you're doing the service right. I talk about the 4 pillars of a driving school, and they are, and I do this like in a chronological order. You've got to get the marketing out there, then you've got to get the sales, then you've got the skills of the ADI, and then you've got people management. You know, look at those 4 areas, see where you're strong at, see where you're not so good at, fill in the gaps. And, you know, you can't go wrong by, you know, getting hold of Smart Driving's offer tonight for the standards check and use that, and you'll, you know, plan your lessons that way. Okay, let's go to a few more questions. Alan Foster, make this a quick answer. Diverting from the subject, can we have car CCTV to protect ourselves and clients? It's not what we're here tonight, but you two can answer that very quickly.
Can you repeat the question, David? Sorry.
Yeah, can we have car CCTV to protect ourselves and clients?
I think the ruling is that the examiner's face must not be seen.
Thank you very much. Great. I like how that you brought it back into the subject. Julie Bunting. Good evening, Julie. I've heard a lot of instructors talk about how we should talk about the effects of drugs on driving and how we could fail if we don't mention it enough.
I've just been thinking about Nigel's question again, and it's kind of related to this one, where Nigel said he knows people who've lost the mark, not mentioning the dual controls. And I think the answer to Nigel's question, and the converse of that, there are plenty of people who've got 52 who never mentioned dual controls. Right? 51, pardon me, who've never mentioned dual controls. I've got 32 on my brain, worrying about the bottom end. It's got to be the context. It really depends on the context. And I don't think you can take any single item or any single subject and say you must do this or you mustn't do that, because it really depends on the context that you're in at the time and the context of the lesson. So if it would be appropriate to discuss drugs within the context of that lesson, absolutely fine. If the opportunity arose, because one of the things you've got to do is seek and seize on opportunities to do things. And something maybe a learner might say or might do might give you the ideal opportunity to say, this is a great chance just to spend a couple of minutes talking about X, Y, Z. Yeah. And you've got to be paying attention and listening and be ready to seize those opportunities that are presented by other people on the road. You know, the classic one, which we all have, is where a car door opens and the learner says, oh, did you pay him to open that door in front of us? But if your lessons are focused, there are hundreds and thousands of those things happening all the time. And stuff like the dual control, stuff like the talking about things, it really depends on the context of the lesson and the need of that learner at that time.
Thank you. Janet Lambert, thank you, Janet, for this. What will actually happen on SC upon arrival at TC? Do you have to present student notes, etc.? Good question.
You don't have to, but it actually sets you in good stead if you turn up with a logbook, if you like, or some material that you can show the examiner and say, this is where we've got to, this is the student, and so on. And then get in the car and agree what the lesson is going to be in front of the examiner, because they're not mind readers. But certainly it won't do any damage whatsoever, but there is no absolute need.
And the other thing I would say that I would always encourage people to do it, because you should do a bit of homework anyway in that respect. And many examiners will appreciate it. Don't be upset if the examiner has a cursory glance at it and doesn't look at it and doesn't read it. He's got a job to do. He's got a limited amount of time. Yeah. So some examiners will scan an A4 page or something if it's got a few bullet points and things. Others won't even look. They'll say, oh yes, very good. Yeah, let's get out to the car. It's not a personal slight at you if they don't want to spend time reading the notes that you've spent 4 hours over the evening before putting together. It's just that they just want to get on with the job and things. But I would suggest that it's a courtesy almost to do that for the examiner.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. I like the courtesy element to it. Yeah, I agree. A few people are asking about to get a link to Smart Driving standard check videos. Adam.bragg, brag with 2 G's at smartdriving.co.uk, or get Adam on Facebook. And if you're not connected to Adam on Facebook, go onto my friends list and you can get him from.
If you want to know more about what's on the video, just go direct to smartdriving.co.uk if you want to have a sniff around before you start. Try before you buy. How long is this offer on?
We said a couple of
tomorrow night.
Friday. Adam's made an executive decision that people can have the videos for £20 instead of $50 until Friday.
My God, I said Monday. I mean, let's put some time on this. I mean, people forget by Tuesday. No, you've got to do it by Monday. Adam, I'm overruling you. You've got to buy it tomorrow by 5 o'clock. Tough.
What day is it?
It's Monday tomorrow.
Sunday night. Sunday night.
It's Monday tomorrow. No,
that's important.
Let's compromise Wednesday.
Monday, yeah, okay.
No, I'll give you £10.
Anyway,
I'll give you Sorry.
Shut up. No, I've run out of wine.
Go on, David. Question.
No mention yet.
There must be a big man close by.
No, this is from Steve Calvert. Steve Calvert Garner. No mention yet of the guidance for DEs carrying out instructor tests, ADI 1. I got a grade A by studying that and understanding what DEs are looking for, learn the practical skills.
That's a fabulous point. Yeah, just download it. It's available to everybody.
And Steve, thanks, Steve.
Incidentally, we reference all of the relevant parts of the examiner's guidance notes are referenced in Standard Success. So we actually we reference and we reproduce under license, which we're allowed to do, all the relevant parts, so you don't have to dig through the guide to try and find
and give examples as well.
Cool. Graham Smith has said, hopping on a couple of minutes ago here, he took pupil records and his CPD along, but examiner wasn't bothered.
No, the examiner's not been. Well, some examiners are just a bit shirty, but I nearly said arsey then. Some examiners are just a bit rude, but they're in a minority.
We've all got different styles,
but they've got a job to do. They haven't really got the time to go through a lot of stuff.
Okay. Is it here? Is it here again? You answered asked the question at the beginning. Thank you. What's the main reason or main reasons why ADIs fail the standards check? I heard most fail on risk management. Can you please give me some examples how you can
give you the main reasons?
Risk management.
First of all, let me just read out. Here's one I prepared earlier.
Blue Peter.
Bear with me because I've not got my reading glasses on. Was the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work towards their learning goals? So we discussed that earlier about adapting the lesson plan, making sure that you keep your lesson to fit with the needs of the learner and help them reach their learning goals. Now, their learning goals is a movable. Goals change as a lesson goes along, you know. So that's
if somebody's 3 foot behind a lorry and you're doing roundabouts, you've got to sort about the 3 foot behind the lorry bit.
The learning goals suddenly change. Was sufficient feedback given to help the pupil understand safety critical incidents? So if somebody does something that's safety critical, what we would call probably a serious fault or a dangerous fault, something where there's, or perhaps not quite that bad, but the learner needs to have sufficient feedback from you and sufficient help from you to understand what that incident was about. These are in no particular order as far as I understand. Was the teaching style suited to the pupil's learning style and current ability? Well, let me come back to the briefing thing. It's no good giving somebody a long briefing if they'd be better suited with a demonstration if they're learning nothing from the briefing. Vice versa. There's no point demonstrating something to somebody who needs words and who needs pictures. Yeah. So
and the other thing about that is as well, don't take an early learner on a busy street they can't cope with either.
There's something there just from a technical point of view. Learning style. A lot of people get hung up about this thing called learning styles. Some who've been on courses like the BTEC course and things like that will have learned stuff from Honey and Mumford and the
those two.
learners. And a lot of that stuff has been debunked. The latest thinking is a lot of that stuff is rubbish. It doesn't mean that people don't have preferred ways that they like to learn, but they don't necessarily fit tick box categories.
Yeah, so you apply it. You know, people have learning styles that merge. And yes. under different circumstances.
Under different circumstances, exactly. So there aren't people who are there are people who like favour vision, people who like favour hearing, people who like favour touch and feel stuff. But those things might change in different contexts. It might be different when they're swimming than when they're listening to music. And so don't get too hung. Well, I think what I'm saying is don't get too hung up on this idea of learning styles. If your learner is responding, that's great. If they're not responding, do something else. Or
ask the learner, how do you want to do this? Do you want me to demonstrate it? Do you want me to show you? Do you want a Q&A? Briefing, whatever.
The next one actually that came up earlier on as well. Was the pupil encouraged to, I don't like the word pupil. I just keep reading pupil, but
client.
Customer, client, learner. Pupil we're going back instructor centric again. There's almost a hierarchy in the relationship in the team when I've got pupil for me, and it might just be my perception. from my school days. But was the pupil encouraged to analyse problems and take responsibility for their learning? And there's another one here. Was a pupil given appropriate and timely feedback during the session? If you look in Dispatch, I forget who wrote it, but somebody from the DVSA wrote a little blog about some of that stuff. It might have been Lynn Thingy, but
Thingy.
Yeah, Lynn Thingy.
Barry, I think.
No, Lynn Thingy, who's chief examiner, or whatever his name is.
Leslie Young.
Leslie Young. There you go.
Not even
Lynn
Lynn.
Thingy.
I'm thinking of Lynn Barry.
No, Leslie Young.
Leslie Young. Well, I don't know. I can't speak for other people, but she's never been communicated with the industry so much. So I tend to forget a name because I don't communicate.
I'm trying to call it a profession. You know how you got this problem with calling pupils?
Yeah.
I'm trying to stop calling it the driving school industry. It's a profession.
I buy that.
There is this little story I tell, which is absolutely true. There's a guy that came to me who had failed his standards check. I asked him what he did, and he said he got a full license holder, and they were doing roundabouts. He wanted the license holder to turn right at the roundabout, and she went on to. Sorry, they were going to do busy urban roads. The first roundabout they came to, he wanted to take the third exit. She went all the way around the roundabout, took that third exit. The next roundabout, exactly the same thing, but they went on to do urban roads without mentioning the roundabouts whatsoever, and wondered why he'd failed.
But she's stuck in the outside lane.
And stuck in the outside lane all the way around, causing a danger.
I love it.
I love it.
I was when you were doing that, because I was visualising it, I was thinking, why don't you go that way around? Because I'm driving on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
There's a question that our receptionist has not yet picked up on. Thanks, Adam. It's in Facebook. Wayne Rees. With so many vehicles and lessons now taking place with in-car cameras, do you think it's a good idea to gain agreement at the beginning of the standards check to ensure the client understood how the cameras were being used?
I don't think it does any harm, but I could only take my take on that. And my take on that, if I was an examiner, I can't speak for examiners, but as a human being, I think, well, why the hell's he only just telling him now? How many lessons has this person had?
Maybe it's just, and don't forget, we're filming this.
Yeah, live. Yeah, we film it. We'll stick it on Facebook and Vision. I'm sure they'll love that. Judgy has written quite a cryptic question. Please, when you do write your questions, have a look, see what you've written, and make sure it makes sense. 4th of December 2017. Can take learner on motorway before that date?
No.
Right. Well, there you go. They've answered that, Judgy. I mean, I didn't.
The motorway stuff hasn't been decided yet. There is no date.
Even after the 4th of December, you can't do it.
Even after the 4th of December, you can't do it.
Lovely. Right. Okay. So, I'm just looking down a list of other questions that I've had. Have we not gone over? What if I'm not sure about the area? I don't normally work around that test centre. What should I do in those circumstances?
Route answer again. Be sure about the area.
Go and find it. Go and look at it.
Take a day off and learn it.
And see where the test centre is. Imagine the pupil you're going to take and what route you would plan. Must. Absolute must. Don't get surprises.
I'm going to say to people, look, if you've got a question that you want answering, there's 85 attendees left. I realise we're only supposed to do this for an hour. We're pushing 2. If you've got a question that you really want answering now, stick it in, because I'm going to close this off very soon, because it is late on a Sunday night.
And that bottle of wine is calling.
But we are far better than X Factor and all that drivel. So I suppose this should have been my last question.
Do I have to sing as well?
Sorry?
Do I have to sing as well? The X Factor.
You're not. Ashley Ellis. Thank you, Ashley. You've been really on the ball tonight. Appreciate it. Are you allowed to change test centre?
Oh, that's a good question. And it's one that I can't immediately answer. DVSA automatically designate what they consider to be
They do that. They link me to Coventry, for instance.
Yeah.
But if I'm working up north, I don't see any reason why a phone call can't be done. And
I think it's a matter of calling DSA.
It would be a phone call.
We'll actually look that one up and get Adam to post it on Facebook or something. But I can't answer that one. Well, the answer will be yes, but I think that the procedure will be. I'm not sure what the procedure is. I think the answer has to be yes. No.
Stephen Hay says, hi all, will all registered attendees, all 520 of you, whatever it is, receive a write-up about this? Well, Stephen, I can tell you that you will receive a recording around 24 hours later, and the recording is in the Vision group to watch it anytime you want. But it's going to be too long to go through, is it, your end, to write all the questions and the answers down, isn't it? And it's going to take some time.
I would suggest, and I'm pushing the sales bit again, the videos will do everything we've done tonight.
I've got no problem. You sell us at 50 quid regularly, and it's 20 quid tonight, thank you. But you're taking your standards check. It's not just about your career in terms of like one pivotal hour. It's about everything that you do. 20 quid?
You'll find that, certainly having done coaching and so on, I find that client-centered learning makes the job so much more interesting.
Oh, it does.
So much more interesting.
Oh, man, yeah.
If it was me, then I'd be sticking my 20 quid in a disk drive right now.
Sorry, just hang on a second.
We've got
a low battery, Adam. You've got your charger, mate, please.
We've got panic on the laptop.
No, they've done this on purpose so that Adam can get his face in. Come on, Adam, where are you?
It's crawling down here.
Adam, put your head up.
Yeah.
Grumble. Dominique has just said thanks so much. Dominica, thanks for taking the time out to attend tonight.
Yes, thank you very much from our point of view as well.
Oh, no, thank you for everybody for putting up with John tonight. Even though, shock horror, it was a night John couldn't remember the chief examiner's name. That's not new.
Zahir, by the way, said, yeah, you can change the test centre. I've changed mine recently.
Oh, good. I knew somebody would know out there.
Yeah. Stephen Hay says, I'm a gold member of Smart Driving.
Thank you,
Stephen. Link to those videos. Well, look, if you're a gold member, then surely you're going to pay 50 quid because you know the value of it.
Steve, you get them at 50% off in gold, or gold members get them at 50% off.
Yes, that's 25 then, not 20.
More than 50%
off by Wednesday, and you'll get it even more. It's 60% off.
Yeah.
Denise Clark, thanks Denise. Yeah, she said that you're allowed to change the test centre.
Thanks everybody who could answer the ones I couldn't.
Yeah, well, it's great because every time they answer it, I'm sending them a little advert about the Driving Instructors Business Summit. Trisha,
is that the one I'll be at?
Yeah, you're speaking at that one, and you, Trisha Hagan. Trisha's my new mate. Trisha's up in Glenrothes, which I've been told how to say properly. It's up north. Where is she written this? She sent to Adam on Facebook. Like to say thanks to all involved in the webinar. Okay. People are going.
Thank you.
People are actually leaving.
Yeah, it's time to go. Yeah, it's bedtime.
People have to go to work tomorrow.
Thanks for a great webinar, everyone. I think we've killed everyone. So, Judith Hicks, thanks for tonight. It's been really useful and interesting. Denise Clark, you're allowed to change test centres. Kevin Graham, thanks for a great webinar. Janet Lambert, will the CT be done at your local TC, or are they only done at Part 3 TCs?
No, they're done at local
level, Janet. Peter Carey, thanks a million. Julie Bunting, thank you everyone for an informative webinar. Peter Carey, hello from Glasgow, sounds like an ABBA record. Steve Calvert, I don't like ABBA, don't send me any of that crap. Steve Calvert Garner has said thanks to the 3/4 of you doing this. I don't know who the fourth is that me or Adam? Graham Smith says that he's gold too. Ashley Ellis, thanks to all. Zahir says thanks very much. John Keogh Grayson says I'm not. I'm not responding to that, John.
Well, you can be, John. Don't worry about it, mate.
And Graham Smith. Oh, he's not a gold member. Looking forward to
go to adimasterclass.co.uk.
Hey, look, you know why we're doing plugs? Richard G says he's a gold member and the videos are brilliant. Actually, a few people are saying how good the videos are. Dominic Hepburn, thanks, very interesting for tonight. Chris, it's a download, isn't it? It's not a DVD through the door, it's a download, is that right?
It's online.
Yeah, it's online, Chris.
You can watch it on your phone and a smartphone and all.
Look, tomorrow night, we've got another webinar tomorrow night. And it's Martin Leather is meeting up with a recently retired driving examiner to talk about how to mark a test. That's going to be really interesting. These webinars are only brought to us by Tina and Kelly at AD&D. They're funding this. They pay the cash because we're all here for the Speed of Sight Driving Instructors Business Summit. I've got loads of links. I've been knocking them out left, right and centre. Driving Instructors Business Summit.co.uk, 17 quid. All the money goes directly to Speed of Sight. If you don't know who Speed of Sight are, they are a blind driving school. You heard that right. They're a blind driving school. Actually, they do an awful lot more than that. And you've got Mike Newman, who's blind from birth. He is the world's fastest man, blind man, driving solo over 200
video of him driving I think it's a Porsche.
He's brilliant. I was only with him in his up at his house a few weeks ago, and they help disabled people. So Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, blind, some disabled from birth or disabled through life, giving people the opportunity to drive. So all the money raised through trade stands and all the money raised through ticket sales goes direct to Speed of Sight. And the whole event is being paid for by AD&D. So thank you so much for that. And we've got smart driving there. So what are you doing here? What can you offer? What can you do at the event? I mean, people can flat and touch you, you know. Don't talk to John, by the way, about what happened 5 years ago on a check test in the yellow box turning right. Don't do crappy detail. What can they talk to you three about?
What do you mean, what can you talk to us about?
Okay, I'll rephrase it. Everybody that comes to the Driving Instructors Business Summit, I ask them, bring your own bloody question about your own business. Drive up on the day and think about it.
I think it can be about training, it can be technical stuff, it can be business stuff. In fact, it can be more or less anything. From our experience between the three of us, David, from my experience, over 37 years of doing this sort of stuff, from Graham's experience in business planning and business management, and from Adam's experience in day-to-day business running and digital marketing and online stuff, we cover most bases.
You do, and you're on the panel.
And I'm on the panel, apparently.
Tell you what, I don't know what we're talking about yet. It really depends on what happens to DVSA. I mean, it is a business, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's about there to improve our business. But if things have happened in terms of the part 3 has changed, we will discuss it, only if it's changed. If the driving test changes, we will discuss that. But we're there to answer your questions because we've done it twice now. And what people say is, I can't believe the information that I've got, because I don't just put it, well, we don't just put industry speakers on there. We've got people from outside the industry that are going to make you feel awesome about yourself, going to help you cut the strings that are holding you back. You're going to identify what's holding you back so you can go forward in your business. And it's not just about your business, it's your personal life as well. And then we've got a little cherry on the top called John Farlam.
David, let me just have a butt in very quickly. Often people ask me some of the things that have inspired me most throughout my career. And lots of stuff is from nothing to do with driver training. Motivational speakers, people from outside the industry. Yeah. You know, look for people like Brian Tracy on YouTube. And I love
Brian Tracy. Psychology of Selling.
Yeah, like there are lots of people out there that can help you. And when you bring people like that to you,
you keep on talking. I'm just going to get something.
And when David, now I'm hosting this webinar on behalf of David this evening. When David brings motivational guys in, or whoever else he's going to bring in, I think that is as important as anything else.
Is that back to front?
No, that's right. Fine. That's
my
fine.
favourite book, that, David. My favourite book.
Yeah.
That's back to front. Can you read it that way?
Yeah, I'm still reading it. It's upside down, but we'll still read it.
Advanced Selling Strategies by Brian Tracy. Complete Brian Psychology.
Psychology of Achievement, I remember, was one of Brian's tape set that I got 30 years ago. It was great, or something like that, you know.
Oh, Glenn Matthews has come with a bit of a question. And does the use of the sat nav in the new test affect how we do the SC at all? I think it would it?
How we...
Does the use of the satellite navigation in the new test affect how we do the standards check at all? Can't see that.
Not at all. I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking that I would probably start now to have a sat nav running with the sound off, probably, but have a sat nav running on all my lessons. Just have it there.
A word of caution: be careful where you position it.
Yes.
Don't put it in the windscreen below the mirror.
Like on the original DVSA video for the test.
I've got a very different question actually, and I don't mean to put Adam on the spot.
Okay.
But
Judith Hicks.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Judith. I'm blaming Judith for this.
Why do I know Judith Hicks? Why do we know you? Ah, okay.
Can we have a CPD certificate from tonight, please, Adam?
Yes, you can.
How would they get that?
I'll knock one up and send it to them.
So have they got to drop you an email, or do you just want the email list and you'll send it out?
Drop me an email list, and anyone else wants one, I can do one.
Okay, so if you want a CPD certificate from Adam, it's adam.bragg, 2 Gs, at smartdriving.co.uk.
Yeah.
So if you've got to this point, then you have seen everything, and it is 2 hours worth. So you have CPD portfolios. There are 520 odd here, Adam. That could take a bit of time.
Yeah. I'll only send them to the ones that ask.
Judith just said thanks very much. Nice to see you guys. Do you have any last words apart from come to the webinar tomorrow night, come to the Driving Instructor Business Summit, buy your bleeding tickets tonight?
There was a question, David, that I saw when we were sort of putting this together. What's the one thing that we could tell to people about the standards check? If they're going to take one thing away, what's the most important thing? And I think both Graham and John will probably say the same thing. And I suspect if I do it after 3, they'll say the same word. What is it?
Route planning.
Route planning. Plan your route.
It's got to be route planning.
Without a doubt.
When you get your route right, people teach themselves.
I've just put Adam's email address up here because people are asking for it. Is that right? Adam.bragg, 2 Gs, at smartdriving.co.uk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for supporting.
Thank you.
We'll have a couple of beers when you come over then, David.
Well, my wife's
Like we
coming
did
over.
last time, eh?
My wife's coming over.
Wow.
Well, even more important to show her what you really like.
Yeah.
I can't remember last time. My God, that was the following day.
David, we'll wish you farewell. Good night. God bless.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Adam, I'll Skype you in a minute, mate.
Take care, mate.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Right, how do you get out of here?